Tekken is a long-standing game franchise which burst onto the fighting game scene with its fancy 3D graphics in 1994. Like all good fighting game franchises that have been around for years, its story stopped making sense to all but the devoted some time ago. The problem is, given its pedigree, it was only a matter of time before Hollywood came knocking, and they tried to make it sensible. And the word sensible hasn't been a concern in the games for a long time. Let's take a look at Tekken, the film.
Get ready for the next battle.
The game's story is, well, ridiculous, but deliberately so. Corporate enemies, family betrayals, gods, demons, cyborgs, ancient evil, bears for bodyguards. It's nonsense and it's at peace with that. We're just along for the ride at this point. I could sit here and try and explain it, but within minutes I'll be drawing diagrams and things and, well, nobody wants that. In 2009 there had been 6 mainline entries into the series, but the powers that be chose not to base the game adaptation directly on any of them. It was more inspired by them as a whole. The Tekken movie is set in 2039. World War III has been and gone. Governments have collapsed, mega corporations have taken over. They both run and rule the planet. The balance of power is maintained through an annual tournament called the Iron Fist. I mean, so far so good, right? Corporations, power and spectacle. Tekken, yeah? Well, no. It's not long before Tekken is being reframed, not as mythology driven, but more of a dystopian social drama. It's not gods and bloodlines that we're dealing with here. Everything supernatural and magical has been stripped out completely. It's slums, resistance movements, corporate policing and class divide, average having of the world stuff. Which, okay, it's a bit more relatable for the average moviegoer here, but it's Tekken. This isn't what it's about. There's enough run-of-the-mill dystopian films to go around already. Jin Kazama, a scrappy young courier living in the Anvil, a slum outside Tekken City which is under the control of the Tekken Corporation, headed up by Heihachi Mishima. Jin is making a living running contraband for resistance groups, much to the disapproval of his mother Jun. Jun is raising her son as a single mother. She doesn't talk about Jin's father and claims that he died some time ago. She's trying to teach him right from wrong, warning him about the evils of the world and that kind of thing. She wants to keep her son safe, but he's not making it easy. Almost inevitably, it's one of his runs that causes a bit of trouble, which results in a crackdown within the album. Corporate enforcers raid the slum and Jun is killed. This, understandably, makes Jin a tad angry. He decides he's going to seek his revenge in the Iron Fist tournament and gains entry by entering as a wildcard after beating disgraced fighter Martial Law. And with that setup in place, we enter into a film which bears very little resemblance to the story of the games it's based on. One of the main obvious problems the film has to deal with is the game's roster. In the Tekken's game, there are over 100 playable characters that appeared at some time or other, which is a lot. It's pretty unrealistic to expect the film to bring in all of these characters in all honesty, and I don't blame it for not doing that. It's a lot of baggage. The film version features just 14 of these characters. Quite the drop. But again, pretty understandable, and it makes it easier than having to deal with pet pandas, bear bodyguards, boxing kangaroos, and wooden training tumbles that are brought to life. So, who are we left with in the film? Well, covering the main players, we've got John Fu as Jin, primarily an actor, although he's trained in Wushu and has worked as a stuntman. He's also gone to play Ryu in the much better Street Fighter Legacy. Kari Haruka Taikwa as Heihachi Mishima, a man who needs no introduction and better known to fans of the genre as Shang Tsung in the first superior Mortal Kombat film. Ian Antidale as Kazuha Mishima, another actor you might know from his later work as Scorpion in the web show Mortal Kombat Legacy. Kelly Overton as Christy Monterero, an actor first and foremost, which might explain why Christy feels more like a character in dystopian drama than a capoeira specialist from a fighting game. Luke Goss as Steve Fox, former pop star turned action actor. One of the few cast members who had to act like a fighter rather than just be one. Gary Daniels as Brian Fury, an English actor who was literally trained in ninjutsu before training to acting. Darren DeWitt Henson as Raven, an award-winning choreographer before acting, which makes sense because Raven moves like a professional even when the script doesn't. Marion Zappacourt as Anna Williams, primarily an actor and unfortunately given very little to do beyond look the part. Candice Hillbrand as Nina Williams, model, singer and actor, but again, more surface than substance here. Lateef Crowder as Eddie Gordo, and if you've seen any films since 2005 featuring capoeira, then Lateef was properly involved. He's the real deal. Roger Huerta as Miguel Rajo, an actual MMA lightweight fighter, which explains why his fight scenes feel real, even if the character barely exists outside him. Kung Lee as Martial Law, another MMA fighter, and probably the last person who wants to meet in a real Iron Fist tournament. Anton Kazabov as Sergei Dragunov, a US national Taekwondo team member, more decorated than the most fictional Tekken fighters. Gary Streams as Yoshimitsu, a career stuntman with decades of martial arts experience, and the rare case where you don't actually see the actor's face, but you absolutely feel the physicality. There's little to no point in comparing the versions of the characters on screen. They are all technically represented correctly, but no real depth to any of them. Nina is still an assassin, but no mention of her relationship with Steve Fox, for example. Same with Christy and Eddie. Brian Fury's more cyborg than zombie, and well yeah, there's more than a few details missed or glossed over. What's more surprising is who they've chosen to leave out. Martial Law is here, but he comes and goes quickly. Heihachi is probably the biggest obvious change. Well, I said change, we don't really get into the nitty-gritty of it all, but the film represents him as a man of honour, if nothing else, mostly. I mean, the games have him as a world-class monster who throws his son off a cliff, not a grumpy old grandpa figure. And, sticking with that point, the reason the game's Kazuma survives being thrown off a cliff is the devil gene he's got, and weirdly, for a film ignoring the supernatural of it all, Jin has a devil tattoo. The tattoo is never really a reference other than an offhand comment about the curse of the Mishima bloodline for Kazuma. Other than that, it's just there. And no, Kazuma doesn't have a scar on his chest from being thrown off a cliff either. There's a few weird decisions there, methinks. The Iron Fist tournament of the film is a brutal affair. It's one that's gleefully broadcast into televisions around the world, and they are brutal. There's no special moves or powers, everyone is just really good at fighting. And, I'll give the film some credit here, the fights are worth watching. With the actors in the film being mostly actual fighters or trained in some other way, it means that they all look the part when the flesh moves off. Some of the scenes look physically punishing, and you can actually see some familiar moves from the game. It's particularly good to see Lateef Crowder as Eddie enter the arena and do his thing. Some of the fighters don't fight in the trademark styles. Christie's more of a mixed martial artist instead of the Kapora style she's known for from the games. But again, her relationship to Eddie is never brought up, and so it might have been weird if she did. The whole setup of the tournament is pretty well done actually. They've done the best to get the game's idea into the film. You see the fighters randomly selected on two big TVs, reminding you of the character's select screen, and even fighting stages are represented with different props in the fighting arena, which I thought was a neat touch to be honest. What we end up with is nothing more than a corporate coup film, which is probably the safest and least interesting direction they could have taken it. Jin fighting his way to the top to take control of the corporation that killed his mother is admirable, don't get me wrong, but it's a far cry from saving the world. It does eventually get revealed that Kazuma Mishima is in fact Jin's father, after Heihachi lets the truth be known. Jun was a competitor of the Iron Fist tournament herself once, but Kazuya assaulted her and she fled to the Anvil to raise a resulting second heir to the Mishima Corporation. Kazuya, hell-bent on not leaving Jin with any claim over his empire, plots to have Heihachi removed and to kill Jin. He's successful at getting rid of Heihachi, but when assassination attempts on Jin fail, he then raises the stakes of the tournament to include fights to the death in the hopes that Jin is defeated. Not that this stops Jin, he's running on pure rage at this point and undeterred. Jin beats all obstacles in his path and wins the tournament. And then at the end he just walks away, which on some level is a final slap in the face of fans. Because if there is one coherent thread to the Tekken games, it's that this cycle you can't walk away from. Power corrupts, violence repeat, bloodlines matter, and it's yet another core shift the film makes from the games. The film gives you a clean ending, which is something the games never did. Well, kind of. There are hints that leave open for the story to continue, and there is an after credits sting which drops further hints about it all.
I am Mishima Heihachi. I am Tekken.
But it's very unlikely to see any kind of resolution to any of that now. I think the most damning thing about the whole thing is that the creator of the games, Katsuhiro Haruda, publicly disowned the adaptation. The whole dev team at Namco were kept away from having any input in the movie and how it was made, and they weren't happy when they saw the final result. They were so angry at what they ended up with, they went as far as to have a CGI Tekken film, Blood Vengeance, made to do some damage control. Not that it worked or even mattered. Blood Vengeance wasn't exactly treated like the second coming of the Street Fighter animated movie, and a few years later we got another live action film, Tekken 2, Kazuya's Revenge, which is actually a prequel and managed to take the series even further away from the source. Weirdly impressive, but we'll save that for another time. The film version of Tekken wasn't made by people who hate the game. It's another example of an adaptation made by people who couldn't or wouldn't fully embrace what it was. It's frustrating on many levels. We've seen these games fail before with a live action Street Fighter film, and we've seen them succeed with Mortal Kombat, which highlights the differences right there, if nothing else. The Namco developers were kept away from this adaptation, and Midway helped set up the Mortal Kombat film. It says it all about what can happen if the right people are involved, really. And yet, there they were in 2009 repeating the same pattern with this movie and the Chun-Li one. I mean, make it make sense. And being fair, again, Tekken looks right, it fights hard and it respects the surface. But remove the madness and new to the supernatural, it becomes another dystopian movie. It's not terrible, it's just not faithful. Its worst crime is that it's restrained. Anyways, I've been Paul and it's been Pixels Popcorn. If you like this video, then do me a favour and drop a like. Subscribe as well if you want. No, I don't. I know what we're going anywhere. Hopefully, I shall see you on the next rewind. Thanks for watching.